Welcome, sleepy one. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Before we begin, please like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And now, close your eyes. Let's begin. I never thought much about roommates after college, but back then money decided everything. I was 23, a year out of school, working a job that barely covered groceries, gas, and half the rent. Living alone wasn't an option. So I split a small one-story rental house with a girl named Patricia. We'd gone to the same college, not friends, just familiar faces who nodded at each other in passing. Moving in together wasn't about compatibility. It was about survival. Rent was dirt cheap, the house was old, and the neighborhood sat somewhere between decent and don't walk alone after dark. I had my room. She had hers. We shared the kitchen and the bathroom, and that was the full extent of our relationship. I worked late shifts at a hardware store. She started early at some call center. Sometimes, at that strange hour where night and morning blur, we'd cross paths in the kitchen, me grabbing leftover pizza, her pouring burnt-smelling coffee. "Morning," she'd mutter. Hair in tangles, eyes half closed. "Morning," I'd mumble back. Though for me it was basically bedtime. That was our rhythm. Minimal words, no arguments, no friendship. Still, I considered myself lucky. I'd heard roommate horror stories. People who blasted music all night, brought sketchy boyfriends home, or ate everything in the fridge. Patricia wasn't like that. She was quiet, punctual with rent, and mostly invisible. For 11 months, that was our peace. By the final stretch of the lease, I was counting the days. I'd saved enough for a tiny apartment across town, and Patricia had mentioned looking elsewhere too. Neither of us suggested staying together. The silence said enough. Then came that night, the one that still clings to me. It was close to midnight. I sat on my bed, laptop open, music playing low, just enough to drown the old pipe's occasional groan. That's when I heard it, voices. At first I ignored it. The walls were paper thin, and the neighbors were prone to drunken arguments. But something about the sound made me pause. It wasn't muffled, it was inside. I muted the music and listened harder. Then Patricia screamed. It wasn't the kind of startled yelp you make at a spider. It was raw, terrified. My stomach dropped. I pushed back from the desk, heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Before I could even reach the door, it burst open. 3 men, dressed in black, faces masked, stormed in like a tide of shadows. Against the wall, one barked, his voice cutting through the air like glass. I didn't argue. My body moved before my brain could catch up. Hands up, back against the corner, heart hammering against my ribs. I watched frozen as they tore through my things, ripping drawers open, dumping clothes, scattering papers, my laptop. "Wait, please, just take what you want, don't hurt me," I stammered. Voice cracking. "Shut the fuck up," another hissed without even glancing at me. 2 minutes stretched into eternity. My room turned into a wreck, clothes, books, and fear everywhere. They took everything that glinted or buzzed. My laptop, phone, wallet, a chain my mom gave me, even a handful of unused gift cards. Then as suddenly as they came, they were gone, slipping down the hall like smoke. I heard movement, Patricia's muffled voice, then silence. 5 minutes later, the front door slammed. I stood there shaking, the adrenaline fading into nausea. My room looked ransacked, but all I could think was, how the hell did they get in? When I stepped into the living room, Patricia was sitting on the couch. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "They took my phone, my wallet," she whispered, eyes glassy. "You call the cops yet?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She shook her head slowly. "We don't have phones anymore." So we went next door, barefoot and dazed, knocking until our neighbor opened up. And from their phone, we called the police. 2 police cruisers pulled up about 20 minutes later, their lights flickering silently against the cracked walls of the house. I stood on the porch, arms crossed tightly, while Patricia sat on the steps, her face pale and distant. The officers moved through the house with practiced calm, notebooks in hand, their radios crackling softly. One of them, a tall guy with a buzz cut, looked up at me. "You didn't see their faces?" I shook my head. "No, sir, masks, all 3. What about a car? You see what they drove?" "No, I didn't hear anything outside." He scribbled something down. "How'd they get in?" I hesitated. "I swear I locked the door before bed." Patricia nodded quickly. "Me too, always do." The cops exchanged a glance but didn't push. They just kept writing, asked a few more half-hearted questions, and told us they'd patrol the area. I knew even before they pulled away that the guys were long gone, vanished into the night with every piece of my life that mattered. The next few days were pure hell. I spent hours canceling cards, waiting in DMV lines, setting up a new phone, and realizing my laptop had held years of files, photos, work projects, things I'd never get back. Patricia, on the other hand, seemed fine, too fine. One evening I found her at the kitchen table sipping soda from a straw, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. "You really think the cops are going to do anything?" she asked without looking up. "They might," I said, sharper than I meant to. "They should." She gave a small shrug, the corners of her mouth curling into something almost like pity. "You should just let it go. We'll never see that stuff again." The way she said it, it was too casual, too certain, like she already knew how it would end. Something twisted inside me then, a small cold seed of doubt that wouldn't stop growing. I didn't confront her, not yet. I just focused on moving out, packing my things, what little was left, and counting down the days. I got into my new apartment a few days early, keys still in my pocket for the old house, telling myself I'd go back one last time to sweep up, maybe grab the few things I'd missed. That's when everything snapped into focus. When I pulled up across the street, there was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. I turned the ignition off and sat there in silence, watching. The front door opened. 3 men stepped out of the car, black hoodies, backpacks slung over their shoulders. They walked right up to the porch. And Patricia opened the door for them, smiling. She let them in like they were old friends coming over for drinks. My whole body went hot. My pulse roared in my ears. I watched as minutes later the men came back out, without the backpacks. That was it. I didn't think. I got out of my car and stormed up the steps, slamming the door open so hard it rattled. Patricia jumped up, her soda spilling across the table. "What the hell are you doing here? Who the fuck were those guys?" I shouted, my voice shaking more from fury than fear. Her eyes darted toward the door, searching for words that wouldn't come. "They your friends?" I stepped closer. "The same ones who robbed me blind." Her face drained of color. "You don't know what you're talking about." "The hell I don't," I snapped. "You set me up." She tried to regain control, voice rising defensively. "Get out, Donald. You don't live here anymore." But I wasn't staying to argue. I turned and walked straight out that door, my hands trembling as I dialed the police from my car. Turns out I was right. The same guys had tried pawning my laptop at a local shop. The owner recognized it from the police bulletin and called it in. Within days, they were caught. Under questioning, Patricia cracked. She admitted everything. She'd known them, planned it with them, let them in that night while I sat there thinking it was a random break-in. The kicker? She hadn't lost a single thing. Not her phone, not her wallet, nothing. It was all mine. Over $3,000 worth of my stuff. She sold me out for a handful of cash. I've never lived with another stranger again. And if I can give anyone advice from that nightmare, it's this. Never move in with someone you don't trust completely. Cheap rent might save your wallet, but your safety, your sanity, your peace of mind, those are worth a hell of a lot more. I never imagined that moving off campus would be the decision that haunted me most during my final year of college. By fall 2017, I was 22, worn thin by the constant noise of dorm life and craving a sense of adulthood, even if it came in the form of cheap rent and creaky floors. Months of tutoring sessions and part-time shifts at the university library had finally earned me enough to escape those shoebox dorms. The university housing office paired me with a roommate named Grace. I didn't know her, hadn't met her before, and the rep's pitch was brief. She's clean, responsible, and she studies architecture. She's usually at the studio late. It should be a quiet setup. That word, quiet, was all I needed to hear. The apartment was a squat, brown brick building on the east side of town, about a 10-minute walk from campus. It reeked faintly of dust and something floral that no longer had a name. The hallway wallpaper was faded. Beige carpets muffled footsteps, and the kitchen cabinets sighed when you opened them. We were on the 3rd floor, high enough to see the street lamps flicker below. The rent was low enough that I ignored every red flag whispering through those creaking walls. Grace met me at the door the day I moved in. Her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, a roll of tracing paper tucked beneath one arm. Her eyes were sharp but distant, as if she were only half present. "Hey," she said, offering a quick, distracted smile. "I'm Grace. I'll mostly stay out of your way. I live at the studio." I laughed, shifting the box in my arms. "Good. I live at the library." That tiny, awkward exchange defined us. We coexisted, polite strangers who shared a lease, not a life. For the first month, everything felt ordinary. I'd come home from tutoring around 9 or 10, reheat leftovers, and eat in silence. The apartment always seemed empty. Grace came in late, often at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd hear her key turn in the lock, the soft thud of her bag hitting the floor, the faint rush of the shower through the wall. She always left her bedroom door slightly open, a single lamp glowing like a nightlight. I figured it was habit, some small comfort in an old building. But in early March, something shifted. It was a Tuesday, the sky outside smeared with rain. I got home around 8:30, damp from the walk, and found Grace in the kitchen, towel drying her hair. "Hey," I said, kicking off my shoes and dropping my backpack on a chair. She turned, her face pale, eyes oddly distant. "Chris, did you just call me? Like 5 minutes ago?" I blinked. "No, I just got here. Why?" Her fingers tightened on the towel. "I swear I heard you. You said my name twice." I frowned, trying to sound casual. "Probably the pipes. This building makes weird noises. Or someone in the hallway." Grace didn't look convinced. "Yeah, maybe," she murmured before slipping quietly to her room. I didn't think much of it. Old buildings do talk. The walls settle, the plumbing sighs, voices echo strangely through vents. It was easy to rationalize, until 2 nights later. We crossed paths in the hallway and she stopped me with a low voice. "Chris, are you sure you don't talk in your sleep?" I raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure. Why?" Her eyes flicked toward the darkened living room. "Because last night I heard you calling my name again. But your door was shut." I stared at her, searching for a joke in her expression. "I was asleep, Grace. I don't do that." She exhaled shakily, gaze dropping to her socks. "It came from the living room," she whispered. "Not your room." Something in her tone, tight, uncertain, made the air between us feel suddenly heavier. Neither of us said another word. That night, for the first time, I noticed her bedroom door was closed, and this time I heard the soft, definite click of her lock. At first, I tried to reason my way through it. Grace was running herself ragged, barely sleeping, living on caffeine and adrenaline from her architecture projects. I told myself exhaustion could make anyone hear things. Hallucinations, misplaced sounds, logical explanations. Always logical. But then I started hearing things too. It was a Friday night in late March. I was lying in bed, reading under the soft glow of my desk lamp, when I caught the faint creak of footsteps in the hallway. Light, uneven, almost hesitant. I paused, listening. It had to be Grace. Her room was across from mine. I waited for her door to open, to hear the rustle of papers or her usual clatter of keys. Nothing. After a minute, I slipped quietly out of bed and cracked my door open. The hallway stretched out in stillness, lit by the dim yellow light over the kitchen. Grace's door was closed, her lamp off. Silence. The next morning, over coffee, I asked casually, "Hey, what time did you get back last night?" She blinked up at me, surprised. "I didn't. Pulled an all-nighter at a friend's. Why?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just curious." 2 days later, I came home from class to find the kitchen light on. I was sure I'd turned it off that morning. Grace's bedroom door was slightly ajar, shadows stretching across the carpet. "Grace?" I called, hesitating. No reply. I pushed the door open a little more. The bed was made, her sketchbooks neatly stacked, the air faintly smelling of graphite and soap. Empty. She wasn't home. That night, the footsteps returned. Slower this time. Heavier. A dragging sound that scraped softly against the carpet and stopped, right outside my door. My entire body went rigid. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. It felt like someone or something was standing just inches away listening. The silence that followed was almost worse than the sound itself. When I finally mustered the courage to unlock my door and look, the hallway was empty again. After that, I started locking my door every night. By April, small things began piling up. The bathroom mirror would fog on its own. Long after either of us had showered, the faucet would start dripping suddenly, then stop as if someone had turned it off. I began waking at 2, sometimes 3, occasionally 4 a.m., every single night. Each time I woke, it felt like the air was unsettled, as if something had just moved away from my door. I'd lie there clutching my phone, the seconds glowing back at me. 3:02, 3:17, 3:41, my pulse hammering in my throat. But the worst moment came in mid-April. I woke to the sound of breathing. Not my own. Not Grace's. A slow, steady inhale and exhale, soft, deliberate, right outside my locked door. I sat up, heart thundering so hard I thought it would give me away. For 10 long seconds it lingered. The rhythm was almost human. Then as suddenly as it had come, it faded into silence. I waited until dawn before checking the peephole. Nothing but the hallway and its motionless air. That morning I cornered Grace by the kitchen sink. "Grace, be honest with me. Have you heard anything else lately? Not just voices, anything." She looked at me for a long time before exhaling. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I've heard footsteps too, sometimes when I'm wide awake. And the whispers." My stomach tightened. "The whispers?" Her eyes darted toward the hall. "They're not just saying my name anymore," she whispered. I can't make out the words. "But it's not you, Chris, I know your voice." After that, she refused to talk about it again. That night, she packed a small overnight bag. "I'm staying with Maddie for a while," she said, avoiding my eyes. I can't sleep here anymore." When she left, the apartment felt cavernous, too quiet. The last few weeks of the lease were torture. Every night I lay in bed with my phone clutched in one hand, staring at the locked door, waiting. The sounds always came between 2 and 4 a.m. The soft tread of unseen steps, the whisper of breath, sometimes faint murmurs I could almost, but not quite, understand. Once the light under my door dimmed for half a second as if someone had walked past it, but I never saw anything, never caught anyone. When the lease ended in May, I moved out hollow-eyed and sleep-deprived, half convinced I'd imagined everything. Grace never came back for her things. Years later, I still don't know if it was stress, bad wiring, or something older woven into that building's bones. But here's what keeps me up sometimes. The voices only ever called Grace's name, never mine. And when she left, they didn't stop. They just got quieter, like they were waiting. I never imagined my mid-20s would feel so temporary, like every decision I made was a placeholder for a life that hadn't started yet. I was 26, living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate Jennifer. Jennifer was a pediatric nurse at Sacred Heart Medical Center in Spokane. She worked those endless shifts that swallowed whole weeks, overnights, doubles, weekends. She had this quiet resilience I admired but didn't fully understand. The kind of person who could come home after 12 hours tending to sick kids, drop her bag by the door and still manage a soft smile. Me? I managed a furniture store. Not glamorous, but steady. I'd been there long enough to get promoted into management. Longer hours, barely better pay. My dad used to say, "Retail steals your soul an hour at a time." By year 4, I'd stopped laughing at that. Jennifer and I weren't close friends. We'd met through a mutual acquaintance who was moving out and needed someone to take over the lease. It wasn't love at first roommate sight, but we got along. I cooked sometimes. She cleaned sometimes. We learned each other's rhythms enough not to collide. She was tidy but not obsessive, kind but private. I respected that boundary. The apartment itself was simple. 3rd floor of a red brick building on the edge of downtown, close enough to walk to bars and coffee shops, but far enough to feel quiet. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom we shared, and a small balcony that overlooked a cracked parking lot. The walls were thin enough to catch muffled snippets of our neighbor's TV, but otherwise peaceful. There was nothing ominous about that place. Not until the knocking started. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring, the air still carrying that bite of leftover winter. I remember walking home from the bus stop, collar pulled high, hands shoved in my jacket pockets. By the time I reached the building, I was bone-tired. Inventory day. My brain felt overcooked, my legs ached. I tossed my keys into the dish by the door, kicked off my sneakers, and collapsed onto the couch with my phone. About 20 minutes later, a knock rattled the door, firm, deliberate, not the quick, polite rap of a neighbor. I sighed, dragging myself up. When I opened it, a man stood there holding a red insulated pizza bag. His jacket matched, bright red with Tony's Pizza stitched across the chest. He glanced down at the paper receipt, then back at me. "Delivery for, Jennifer?" His voice was flat, polite. Before I could answer, Jennifer appeared from her room. Still in scrubs, hair piled in a messy bun, stethoscope dangling from her neck like she'd forgotten to take it off. She frowned. "I didn't order a pizza." The man blinked, checked his slip. "Third floor, right? Unit 3C? "Yeah," she said, shaking her head, "but not me." He stood there for a beat, expression unreadable, then gave a small nod. "Must be a mix-up." He turned and walked away. I closed the door slowly. Jennifer crossed her arms. "That was weird," I said. "Probably wrote down the wrong number," she murmured, heading back to her room. And that was it. Or so we thought. 2 nights later, another knock. Same tone, firm, confident. When I opened the door, it was him again. Same red jacket, same blank expression. But this time he wasn't holding a receipt, just a single pizza box. "Delivery for Jennifer?" Jennifer was standing behind me. I felt her tense. "I didn't order anything," she said, voice tight. He looked at her, then at me. His eyes lingered on her for just a second too long. "Maybe I got the wrong unit again, sorry." He turned to leave. When I closed the door, Jennifer exhaled sharply. "Same guy?" "Yeah." "That's not just a mistake anymore." "Maybe he's new," she said, trying to sound rational. "Doesn't know the routes yet." "Or," I said quietly, "he knows exactly what he's doing." Jennifer didn't respond. It happened again the next week. Different pizza box, different restaurant, same man. "Delivery for Jennifer," he said, tone almost rehearsed. Jennifer stood frozen behind me. I forced a tight smile. "No one here ordered that." He nodded once, muttered, "I'll check the address," and walked away. When the door shut, Jennifer whispered, "Why does he only ever say my name?" I didn't have an answer. Around that time, Jennifer's schedule shifted. She started coming home later, claiming she'd been put on doubles. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, like something at work or maybe outside of it was draining her. One Thursday, I got off early and walked home. As I fumbled with the lock at our apartment door, movement in the parking lot below caught my eye. A man leaned against a dark sedan, arms crossed, head tilted slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. No red jacket this time, no pizza bag, just him. The same face, the same blank stare. My stomach twisted.
He wasn't delivering anything now.
He was just watching the building. That night, when Jennifer got home, I told her. She froze mid-step, her hand still on the strap of her bag. The color drained from her face. "I think," she began, voice trembling. "I think I've seen him before." My chest tightened. "Where?" "At work," she said, rubbing her forehead as if trying to scrub the image away. "By the parking garage once. Another time across the street while I was waiting for the bus. And last week," her voice cracked slightly. "Last week I saw him near my car. He was bent down like he was checking something. I panicked and walked back inside." "Jesus, Jen," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "Why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed hard. "Because I wasn't even sure it was him. I thought maybe I was being paranoid." "Paranoid?" I repeated. "He's been at our door 3 times. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Jennifer never cried. "What do we do?" she whispered. The next morning, we went to the leasing office. Ron, the building manager, sat behind the desk in his usual faded blue polo, sipping coffee like the world couldn't touch him. I explained everything. The fake pizza deliveries, the man outside, Jennifer seeing him at the hospital. Ron listened quietly, nodding, then set his cup down with a sigh. "Look," he said, "unless he actually enters the building or causes a disturbance, there's not much I can do." Jennifer leaned forward, voice tight. "He stood at our door multiple times." "Isn't that a disturbance?" Ron's sigh deepened. "We don't have cameras except the one by the front door. And it doesn't actually record. Just for show." I stared at him. "So if someone's stalking a tenant, your advice is what? Wait until he breaks in?" He lifted one shoulder in a shrug. You could file a police report, but technically he hasn't broken any laws yet. Jennifer took it into her own hands after that. At the hospital, she gave a description to security. They promised to check footage of the lot, even offered escorts to her car. But their words echoed Ron's. Unless he approached her directly, there wasn't much they could do. I started walking her home when I could, meeting her after my shifts ended early. But retail doesn't allow much mercy. Most nights she was on her own. One evening, Carla, the woman from across the hall, caught me on the landing. "Hey," she said quietly, glancing toward our door. "Did someone new move in with you guys?" I frowned. "No, why?" She hesitated. "Yesterday around 6, I saw a man come up the stairwell. He just stood outside your door for a while. Then he left. I thought maybe he was waiting for one of you." My stomach dropped. "No," I said, voice low. "No one's supposed to be here." That night, Jennifer and I ordered 2 cheap security cameras from Amazon. We set one inside, pointed at the front door, and another out on the balcony, tucked behind a planter box. The first night, nothing. The second, 2:13 a.m., the front camera caught him, standing outside our door. No knocking, no movement, just standing there. For 3 full minutes. Then he turned and walked away. Jennifer watched the footage with her hand over her mouth. "Matt," she whispered, "what if he tries to get in?" "We'll file a police report," I said, trying to sound firm even as my own voice wavered. We did. Sent them the footage. They promised to investigate. We never heard back. Within 2 weeks, Jennifer broke her lease. She didn't care about the penalty. She barely packed. Just clothes, a few boxes, her essentials. "I can't do this anymore," she said, eyes glassy but her tone steady. "I don't feel safe here." When she left, the apartment felt wrong. Not just empty, but hollow. I told myself it was the quiet, that I just missed having someone else around. But sometimes, late at night, when the lights are off and the world has gone still, I swear I hear it again. 3 soft knocks. Like someone standing outside waiting. I never gave much thought to the idea of sharing a room with someone. At 15, it seemed like just another part of the boarding school package. Everyone had a roommate, and honestly, I thought it might be fun. Built-in sleepovers every night, hushed whispers past midnight, swapping snacks, maybe even becoming best friends like in the movies. But it wasn't like that at all. My roommate was Jessica Alvarez. She wasn't cruel. She didn't snap at me or torment me the way you hear about in horror roommate stories. She just didn't try. She didn't laugh at my jokes. She didn't ask me anything about myself. She didn't even attempt small talk. The silences stretched long and heavy, like a quiet that had taken root in the corners of our room. I assumed she might be shy or just introverted. Some girls are like that, and at first it didn't bother me too much. Still, the quietness between us grew, dragging on longer than I expected. I had just transferred that fall to St. Helena Academy, a private all-girls boarding school in Massachusetts. My parents lived in upstate New York, and they wanted me somewhere safer, somewhere more focused. After the public high school in our district kept making headlines for fights and drugs, they thought this was the answer. Oak Hall, the dormitory where I lived, was an old red brick building with 4 floors. I was in room 312, a top floor corner with 2 twin beds, 2 desks, 2 wardrobes, and a single window looking down at the courtyard. The hallway smelled faintly of industrial cleaner, mixed with the buttery tang of popcorn from the microwave station downstairs. Jessica had been there since freshman year. Local from Worcester, dark hair, pale skin, glasses she almost never wore. She had a routine. A battered leather notebook that sat on her nightstand. Edges frayed, cover faded, pages bent. I never saw her write during the day, only after lights out, cupping a small flashlight over the pages, scribbling quietly as if the room itself might hear her. I remember thinking she seemed lonely. I even told my mom once on the phone, "I think my roommate doesn't have any friends. I might try to talk to her more." That was September. By October, everything changed. It was a Wednesday night, just after midnight, when the fire alarm shrieked through the building like a banshee trapped in metal. The sound yanked me upright from sleep, my heart hammering, the red strobe above our door slashing the room into violent flashes. I threw on my hoodie, shoved my feet into sneakers. "Jessica!" I called, voice cracking. I turned toward her bed, but it was empty. Her blanket was folded back neatly, perfectly, like she had never been there at all. I hesitated, trying again. "Jess, you coming?" Silence. I figured she must have gone down the stairs with the others. I hurried after them, joining the flood of girls in pajamas and slippers, the stairwell packed and warm with anxious chatter. Outside, the October air bit at my skin, cold enough to sting through my thin hoodie. Everyone huddled under the floodlights, shivering while teachers tried to take roll call. "Just a drill," someone muttered. Not even smoke. I hugged myself, scanning the crowd, heart sinking. Jessica wasn't there. I checked group after group, circled the edges, even asked a few teachers quietly, but there was no sign of her. My chest tightened, a heavy, pressing panic that settled in my stomach. Something wasn't right. She wasn't exactly friendly, but she was my roommate. That made her my responsibility, or at least that's what it felt like. So I went straight to one of the supervisors, Miss Powell, clutching my arms against the cold and trying to sound calm. "My roommate's not here," I told her. "I can't find her anywhere." Miss Powell frowned down at her clipboard, flipping through the names as the wind tugged at her scarf. "She's probably with another group, honey," she said, not looking up. "Don't worry." But I did. The unease crawled under my skin. And even after the alarm was cleared and we were herded back inside, I couldn't shake it. When I pushed open the door to room 312, I froze. Jessica was sitting cross-legged on her bed, perfectly calm, like nothing had happened. The red light from the hallway flickered once before fading, leaving the room dim and quiet. She looked up at me with a faint smile, her voice smooth and almost amused. That was fast. I stared at her, my pulse still hammering from the chaos outside. "What the hell, Jess? Where were you? I was looking for you out there." She tilted her head slightly, studying me in this unnerving, deliberate way. "I stayed here," she said softly. "I wanted to see if you'd leave me behind." For a second, I thought she was joking. I gave a nervous laugh, waiting for her to smirk or roll her eyes. But she didn't. Her expression stayed the same. Calm, steady, the corners of her lips curled in that small, strange grin that didn't reach her eyes. "That's not funny," I muttered, throat tight. I climbed into bed, yanking the blanket over myself like it could somehow block out the chill crawling up my spine. But I barely slept. Every time I cracked my eyes open, I could feel her still awake, sitting there in the dark, watching. The next morning, I noticed something odd. The window on my side of the room wouldn't open. The latch was jammed. I frowned, tugged at it, then leaned closer. There was a thin piece of metal, like a paperclip or maybe a bobby pin, jammed deep into the hinge, on purpose. I tried pulling it out, but it was wedged tight. My first thought was, why would anyone do that? I didn't mention it to Jessica. Later that day, after classes, I went to grab my spare room key from the top drawer of my desk. It wasn't there. I tore through my notebooks, my folders, even the pencil case, convincing myself I'd just misplaced it. But that night, while pulling back my blanket, something caught the light, a glint of silver. There, half hidden under Jessica's pillow, was my key. My stomach dropped. My throat went dry. She'd left it sticking out, just enough for me to notice. I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear her answer. That night, I shoved the dresser in front of the door before I went to sleep. 2 days later, I cracked. I went to the school counselor, Mr. Reeves. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a permanent smell of coffee lingering around him. I sat in his small office, twisting my hands together until my knuckles ached, and told him everything in a shaking voice. "I don't know what's wrong with her," I said. "She stayed inside during the alarm. She said she wanted to see if I'd leave her behind. My key went missing. My windows jammed shut. I don't feel safe." He listened quietly, leaning back in his chair, his brow creased. When I finally stopped, he exhaled slowly and rubbed his chin. "Thank you for telling me this, Lily," he said. He always used first names, softly, like he was grounding you. Sometimes students act out in strange ways. It doesn't always mean harm. But your comfort is important. We'll handle this. That evening, they moved me into another room on the second floor. They said it was temporary, just until things were sorted out. But Jessica never came back after winter break. She just disappeared. Life went on. I got a new roommate, a bubbly sophomore named Rachel, and for the first time in months, the air in my room felt light again. The tension I'd been carrying loosened and I started sleeping through the night. But even now, years later, I still think about that night. The way Jessica said it. I wanted to see if you'd leave me behind. It wasn't teasing. It wasn't sarcastic. It was like she was testing me. Like I'd failed some quiet, private exam I never knew I was taking. And sometimes, when it's late and I can't sleep, I catch myself wondering if I had stayed behind that night, what would she have done? I'll never know, and that somehow is worse than any answer. I was 23 in the spring of 2021, living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the edge of Riverdale, a medium-sized city that always felt suspended between small-town quiet and the relentless hum of urban chaos. Rent wasn't cheap, but I split it with my roommate Carol, who worked long, erratic shifts at a bakery downtown. Most nights I was alone in the apartment, listening to the soft thrum of traffic outside and the occasional waft of fresh bread Carol brought home when she closed late. I had only moved to Riverdale a few months earlier. Before that, my life had been in a small town about 2 hours away. The adjustment wasn't just about navigating a new city. It was the deafening silence of an empty apartment when Carol was gone. I worked at a retail store in the mall, barely scraping by, but it was independence. Nights of microwaved noodles under the dim yellow kitchen light felt like freedom, even if they weren't glamorous. The only familiar face in Riverdale was William. We'd known each other since grade school, built forts in the woods, spent summers glued to video games, and even went on family trips together. He wasn't just a friend. He was family. After college, life pulled us in different directions. Jobs, routines, new cities. But when I told him I'd moved here, his response was instant, almost gleeful. Finally, man. We'll be in the same place again. Just like old times. It felt comforting at first. Someone I could grab coffee with. Someone who knew me without introductions. The first time I invited him over to meet Carol, he showed up holding a small bakery box. Not from Carol's bakery, but another across town. He handed it over with an awkward smile. Figured I should bring something, you know. Thanks for letting me hang out. Carol smiled politely, accepting it. Thanks. We all sank into the living room, talking about nothing in particular. That night felt ordinary, safe even, but things shifted quickly. At first, William texted me, "You home? Mind if I swing by?" I didn't think much of it. Then the text stopped. He started just showing up. I'd walk in after a long shift to find him on the couch as if he lived there. Sometimes he brought beer, sometimes nothing. One night he came in holding a bouquet of flowers and handed them to Carol. "These are for you, for putting up with me crashing here all the time." Carol froze for a moment, then forced a tight smile. Thanks," she said, setting them carefully on the table. After that, William began bringing her up in our conversations, casually, innocently, he claimed. "So when does Carol usually get off work? She ever talk about her family? Does she have a boyfriend?" I laughed it off. "Why are you interested?" He shrugged, voice low, deliberate. "Just curious." But it didn't feel innocent. One evening in late March, I got home earlier than usual. The apartment was dark except for the flicker of the TV. William sat on the couch alone. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag. "How the hell did you get in?" He didn't flinch. "Door was unlocked. Figured you wouldn't mind." My stomach tightened. Carol was strict about locking the door. I double-checked it every night before bed. Something in his casual tone made my skin crawl. "Well, lock it next time, man." "Seriously?" He smirked. "Relax, I'm not going to steal your stuff." I laughed weakly but made a mental note. From that night on, I insisted Carol keep the deadbolt locked. No exceptions. A week later, I came home to find Carol sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking shaken. Her eyes flicked up at me, wide and tense. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. She hesitated, biting her lip, then whispered, "It's William," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the window before she whispered, "William came by while you were at work." My chest tightened. "You let him in?" She shook her head quickly. "No, he buzzed the door." I ignored it, but he didn't leave. He just stood there for like half an hour, then he finally walked off. I dragged a hand down my face, the weight of it settling in my gut. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Carol's shoulders slumped. Because I didn't want to make it a big deal. I know he's your friend. She swallowed hard. He makes me uncomfortable. That hit me harder than I expected. William had been in my life for nearly 20 years, a constant through every phase of growing up, and now Carol, my roommate, didn't feel safe in her own home because of him. That night, I messaged him. Don't come by unless I say it's cool. You can't just show up like that. Hours later, his reply came. Got it. Won't happen again. For almost 2 weeks, he vanished. No texts, no visits, no late-night knocks. I started to breathe easier. Carol did too. The apartment felt lighter, almost normal again. Then, one night around 2 a.m, I woke to a faint noise in the kitchen, soft, rhythmic, like glass being set down. I assumed it was Carol getting water, but when I stepped into the hallway, the air felt wrong. Too still, too cold. I froze. William was standing in the kitchen. My voice came out as a whisper, raw with disbelief. What the fuck are you doing here? He turned slowly, his face pale and unreadable. Door was open. My pulse pounded in my throat. No, it wasn't. I locked it. He didn't argue. He just looked at me, eyes flat and distant, then said quietly, I'll go. And he did. He walked out, silent except for the soft click of the front door closing. I stood there shaking, every muscle trembling, listening to the emptiness he left behind. In the morning, I told Carol. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. Oh my God, I didn't hear a thing. That day, we called the landlord. By evening, he'd changed the locks and installed a new deadbolt. But even with the fresh metal glinting under the porch light, neither of us felt safe anymore. Still, William wasn't finished. One afternoon, while I was at work, my phone buzzed. Carol's text came through. He's outside. Across the street. Just standing there. He stayed for nearly half an hour before finally walking away. That night we went to the police. The officer we spoke with, a tired-looking man with graying hair, shook his head after taking notes. We'll file a report and issue a warning, he said. But unless he makes a direct threat or breaks in again, there's not much we can do. It felt like waiting for something worse to happen. The landlord installed a camera above the entrance and gave us another set of keys, but the tension didn't fade. Every time the buzzer rang, Carol flinched. Every time I caught sight of someone lingering on the sidewalk, my chest tightened until I could barely breathe. A few months later, a mutual friend messaged me out of nowhere. Hey, did you hear about William? He quit his job, packed up, and left town. No one knows where he went. I stared at the screen, stomach hollow. For weeks afterward, I half expected him to come back, to find him standing in the kitchen again or outside under the streetlight, or whispering my name through the buzzer. But he never did. Sometimes late at night I still think about it, whether there were signs earlier, little cracks I ignored because of nostalgia or trust. Maybe he'd always been like that, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. The scariest part wasn't what happened inside that apartment. It was realizing that someone I thought I knew, someone I would have sworn was safe, had become something else entirely. Learned the hard way. Just because you've known someone your whole life doesn't mean you ever truly knew them at all. I never thought much about roommates until I actually had to live with one. I'd always imagined it like the sitcoms. People sprawled on the couch, laughing over takeout, maybe arguing once in a while, but ultimately having each other's backs. Reality, though, was far messier, far less forgiving. It was a couple of years after college when I moved into that apartment. I was 24, barely scraping by on a customer service job that seemed designed to keep me just above broke. I stumbled across a listing online for a 3-bedroom on the south side of town. The building was old, 2 stories with peeling yellow paint and thin walls that seemed to amplify every creak and groan. The rent was cheap, so cheap that I ignored everything else. That's how I ended up with Edward and Donna. We met through a roommate matching site, strangers thrown together by circumstance. Our apartment was on the first floor, right by the parking lot. Open the front door, and you could practically step onto the sidewalk. Inside, it wasn't much to brag about. Dingy carpet, a kitchen with peeling linoleum, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been scrubbed since the Reagan administration. Still, it was livable. At first, things weren't bad. Edward was easygoing, quiet, mostly gone during the day and nights working at a warehouse. Donna, though, that was a different story. She didn't lift a finger around the place. She used my pans, my plates, ate my food, and left everything strewn across the counters and floor. Cigarette smoke clung to the air like a stubborn fog, and she and her boyfriend Troy smoked inside, ignoring every polite request to step outside. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning to the blare of their TV, some reality show echoing through the paper-thin walls. One morning, after scraping her dishes out of the sink for what felt like the 100th time, I snapped, "Donna, you've got to start doing your part. We're all paying rent here. It's not fair that Edward and I do everything." She leaned against her doorway, arms crossed, a cigarette dangling between her fingers. "I pay my share. That's all that matters. If you've got a problem with the mess, that's your problem." I shot Edward a look, hoping for backup. He just shrugged, sinking into his usual role of peacemaker, avoiding conflict at all costs. From that moment, things between Donna and me spiraled. She barely spoke to me unless it was to snap back, venom laced in every word. Edward tried once to mediate, suggesting we split chores evenly, but she shut him down just like she did me. Months dragged on, heavy and monotonous. Occasionally, Donna and Troy would disappear for a couple of days, and those stretches of quiet were blissful, almost sacred. But the calm never lasted. One evening after Edward had left for his shift, I noticed the trash had overflowed again. Donna had crammed a pizza box and half a dozen beer cans into the bin until it spilled onto the floor. "Are you serious?" I muttered, grabbing the bag. As I tied it, her voice floated from her room. "What's your problem now?" "My problem," I said through gritted teeth, "is that you keep filling the trash and never take it out. I pay rent. That's my part. If you don't like it, move." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Whatever. You're acting like my mom." I stuffed the bag under my arm and stormed out to the dumpster behind the building. The parking lot was dim, lit by a buzzing street lamp casting a pale yellow glow over cracked asphalt. I tossed the bag, shook my head, and trudged back toward the front door. When I reached it, my stomach dropped. The door was locked. I patted my pockets, no keys. I'd only been gone for 30 seconds. Panic prickled my skin. "Donna, open up!" I pounded on the door. Silence. I knocked louder. "Donna, come on!" "I don't have my keys." Still nothing. The quiet stretched, oppressive, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. My pulse thumped in my ears as I realized how completely trapped I was. Silence stretched across the dim hallway. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone and called her. It went straight to decline. I called again, decline, and again, decline. After 10 relentless attempts, her voice finally hissed through the speaker, dripping with sarcasm. "What the hell do you want?" "Open the door," I said, my voice tight, bristling. "I'm standing right outside." "Not my problem," she snapped, and hung up. I stared at my phone, hands shaking, blood pounding in my temples. For 30 long minutes, I pounded on the door, called, texted, nothing. The quiet mocked me. Finally, I called the cops. When they arrived, Donna appeared at the door like a disarming angel of innocence. "Oh, I didn't hear him," she told the officers with a fake, fluttering shrug. I held up my call log. The officers shot her a look, then explained calmly that she couldn't legally lock me out since I was on the lease. They left shortly after, but the message was crystal clear. I turned to her, jaw tight. "You're unbelievable." She smirked, tilting her head like it was some game. "What are you going to do about it?" Not long after, Donna announced she was moving in with Troy for good. She packed most of her things, but insisted she'd continue paying her share until the lease ended. Edward and I breathed easier. Finally, some peace. Except the peace didn't last. 1 month later, she stopped paying rent. The landlord called, and Edward and I agreed to cover it ourselves rather than risk her returning. 2 months passed in silence. Then around midnight one night, I was scrolling on my phone in my room while Edward slept down the hall. A sharp crack shattered the quiet. Glass, my stomach dropped. My heart thudded. Footsteps crunched across the living room. My room didn't have a lock. I grabbed my phone, ready to dial 911. The door flew open. She was there. Hair wild, eyes bloodshot, a twisted grin tugging at her lips. "Why didn't you answer the door?" she demanded, staggering slightly. "What?" I stammered, frozen. "You broke the window. You still had your key." "I lost it," I said cautiously, "and I needed to get in." "I live here," she snapped. "You don't live here anymore." "You haven't even paid rent," I said, trying to steady my voice. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "What are they going to do, evict me? Please." The stench of alcohol hit me sharp and suffocating. My chest tightened. "Donna, you can't just—" "Shut up." She cut me off, stepping closer, swaying slightly. "I had a fight with Troy. I'm done with him. I'm moving back in." I clenched my fists, forcing calm. "You broke a window. You're not moving back in. The landlord's going to—" "I don't care. I need a place. And this is still mine," she shrieked, voice raw and trembling. Edward stirred in the hall, groggy. "What the hell is going on?" Donna spun toward him, wild-eyed. "Oh, look who decided to show up." "Don't act like you don't want me here." Edward rubbed his face, voice tight with disbelief. "You broke the window." "Are you out of your damn mind?" For the next half hour we argued, voices raised, adrenaline pulsing, until she finally retreated into her old room and locked herself in. Sleep eluded me that night. The next day, we called the landlord. Within a week, Donna was officially evicted, window damage, unpaid rent, the whole mess. She returned once more with a friend to retrieve the remainder of her things, glaring at me the entire time without a single word. Then she was gone. I never saw her again. To this day, I still triple-check the locks before bed, heart hammering if I hear the slightest sound in the hallway. I never planned on having a roommate. If I'm being honest, I've always liked living alone. I'm the kind of guy who values peace, quiet, and not having to answer to anyone. But a few years back, things weren't that simple. I just moved out of my mom's place for the first time, and the world hit me hard. Rent near the city was brutal, and my warehouse job barely covered groceries and gas, let alone a place of my own. I remember sitting at my tiny desk, calculator in hand, realizing the only way I could make it work was to split rent with someone. I wasn't thrilled about it, but then I saw an ad online, 2-bedroom house, cheap rent, quiet area, roommate wanted. The guy's name was George. He described himself as quiet, responsible, and clean, and wanted someone the same. Sounded easy enough. I messaged him that night. 2 days later, I was standing in front of this old beige house with peeling paint, a sagging porch and a patchy lawn that looked like it had given up years ago. George opened the door before I could knock twice. Tall, thin, maybe late 20s, with tired eyes that darted over me like he was taking inventory. His hair was short and unkempt, like he'd just rolled out of bed or hadn't gone to sleep at all. "You must be the guy from the ad," he said, voice flat, almost mechanical. "Yeah, Osley," I replied, reaching out a hand. He just nodded and stepped aside without shaking it. Inside wasn't much better. The carpet was dingy, smelled faintly of mildew. The kitchen was outdated, the wallpaper curling at the edges. Still, for the price, I couldn't complain. George walked me through the place in silence, answering my questions with clipped replies. "Utilities included?" I asked. "Mostly. We split the electric," he muttered, not looking at me. That was about the extent of our conversation. I signed the lease that afternoon. I told myself roommates didn't need to be friends, just people who shared walls. And for the first week, that's exactly what we were. He stayed in his room, I stayed in mine. Sometimes we'd bump into each other in the kitchen. He'd mumble a quick "hey" or "what's up," then vanish again. I actually liked it that way. 2 strangers coexisting quietly. But around the second week, things started to get strange. It was a Tuesday night, maybe 2 in the morning. I was dead asleep when bang, 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 the sound jolted me upright, my pulse pounding in my ears. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then it came again. 3 hard, deliberate knocks that rattled the door frame. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice rough with sleep. The knocking stopped. Just like that. Silence stretched out, thick and heavy. I swung my legs out of bed, flicked on the lamp, and stared at the door. My breath fogged faintly in the cold air. Finally, I turned the knob and opened it a crack. No one. The hallway was dark except for a faint strip of moonlight spilling in from the living room. I glanced toward George's room, His door was shut, the bottom edge shadowed and still. "George?" I whispered. Nothing. I stood there for a long moment trying to reason it out. Maybe he needed something and changed his mind. Maybe the old house had just settled weird. The rationalizations came quick, desperate to fill the silence. Finally, I shut the door, told myself to stop being paranoid, and crawled back into bed. By morning, George was already gone for work. I made coffee, considered bringing it up, then pictured how dumb it would sound. "Hey, did you knock on my door like a maniac at 2 a.m? I let it go, told myself it was nothing, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been a dream. The next night, it happened again. A violent pounding shook my door, 3 quick hits that made the wood shudder. I was on my feet before my brain even caught up. "George, quit screwing around," I shouted, my voice cracking from sleep and adrenaline. The knocking stopped immediately. I yanked the door open so fast it slammed against the wall. The hallway was empty. Same shadows, same stale air, but this time I caught something. Down the hall, George's bedroom door was moving, just barely, inching closed like someone had slipped inside a second ago. "Unbelievable," I muttered, storming over and pounding on his door. "Hey man, you think this is funny?" No answer. "Seriously, what the hell's your problem?" I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. No shuffling, no breathing, no sign of life. The silence pressed against me until I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wanted to kick the door in, but I stopped myself. The last thing I needed was a screaming match in the middle of the night. So I turned away, stomped back to my room, and slammed my door hard enough to rattle the frame. I lay there staring at the ceiling, furious and wide awake until the first traces of dawn. By the third night, I'd lost all patience. The banging came again, louder this time, like fists hammering with rage. The door shook under the impact, and I was already halfway out of bed before I realized I was moving. I threw the door open and froze. George was standing right there. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just sweatpants, his hair a mess, eyes wide and glassy like he was half asleep or somewhere else entirely. His face was expressionless, his breathing shallow. "What the hell is your deal?" I snapped. He didn't blink. Then out of nowhere, he shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward, slamming into my nightstand. A lamp crashed to the floor, the bulb bursting with a sharp pop. By the time I caught my balance, George had turned and sprinted down the hall. He slammed his door and locked it before I could reach him. "Open up!" I shouted, pounding on his door. "You got a problem with me? Say it to my face." Nothing. Not a sound. I stood there shaking, half from anger, half from something colder. Eventually I gave up, went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed until morning light seeped through the blinds. Sleep never came. When I heard his door creak open a few hours later, I was waiting. "George," I said sharply. He looked up, annoyed, like I'd just interrupted his morning routine. "What? You going to explain yourself? You've woken me up 3 nights in a row, banging on my door like a lunatic. Last night you shoved me. What the hell's your problem?" He just stared at me. His jaw flexed, a tiny muscle ticking in his cheek. Then finally he said in this low, flat voice that chilled me, "I don't like you. I don't want to live with you." That was it. No emotion, no apology. Just cold. I blinked, stunned. "Then why didn't you just say something instead of acting like a psycho?" He didn't answer. Just pulled on his jacket, eyes empty, and walked straight out the front door. That was my breaking point. Whatever his deal was, anger, instability, something worse, I wasn't sticking around to find out. I spent the next few days glued to my phone, calling every listing I could find. Eventually, I lucked into a small 1-bedroom across town. Not great, but safe. Those last few nights in the house were unnervingly quiet. No pounding, no footsteps, nothing. George kept to his room and I kept to mine. We never spoke again. When I finally moved out, hauling that last box to my car, I felt this strange lightness in my chest, like exhaling after holding my breath for weeks. Looking back, I still don't know what his problem was. Maybe he wanted me gone and thought scaring me was easier than asking. Maybe he had some kind of breakdown. Or maybe he just hated the idea of anyone else existing near him. Whatever it was, he could have just said it. Instead, he turned it into some twisted, silent game. Sometimes, when I think about those nights, the pounding on the door, the shove, the vacant stare, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did. What he might have done next. All I know is this: I'll never live with a stranger again. I never imagined that my first semester of college would turn out to be the most terrifying experience of my life. After graduating high school, all I could think about was escaping my small town and starting fresh somewhere bigger, somewhere that felt like it had space for me to be someone new. My parents drove me to Ridgeview University, a mid-sized school nestled in a city far enough to feel unfamiliar, yet close enough that I could still make it home for holidays. Like most freshmen, I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I didn't know a single person, and I figured making friends would be the key to surviving. I'd been assigned to live in Maple Hall, one of the older dorm buildings on campus. 6 stories of brick, narrow hallways, and squeaky floors that groaned under every step. The faint, ever-present smell of old radiator pipes lingered in the air. Each floor had 2 communal bathrooms and maybe 20 rooms. It wasn't luxurious, but I didn't care. I was just thrilled to be living on my own. I hadn't chosen my roommate. Housing had paired me with someone randomly. His name, according to the slip they handed me, was Kevin Larson. That was all I knew about him as my parents, and I hauled my belongings up the stairs. The strange part was that when we finally dragged everything into the room, Kevin wasn't there. His side of the room looked lived in already. Folded clothes sat neatly in the drawers. A couple of notebooks lay stacked on the desk, and a thin comforter was tucked carefully over the bed. But Kevin himself was nowhere in sight. "Guess he's busy," my dad said, wiping sweat from his forehead after lugging my mini fridge up 3 flights of stairs. "Or shy," my mom added with a small, encouraging smile. "You'll probably meet him later tonight." I didn't think much of it. Move-in day was chaos. People rushing in and out, parents hugging tightly and crying in the hallways, RAs shouting instructions over the din. After my parents hugged me goodbye and drove off, it wasn't until the next afternoon that I finally met him. I had just returned from my first intro to psych class and swung the dorm door open. There he was, sitting rigidly at his desk, eyes locked on a spiral notebook as if he'd been there for hours. He turned his head slowly as I stepped in. "Hey," I said quickly, forcing a smile and dropping my backpack onto the chair. Kevin didn't respond. He just stared at me for a brief moment, then returned to his notebook. I figured he hadn't heard me, so I tried again, walking over and holding out my hand. "You must be Kevin. I'm Alex." There was a pause, just long enough to make me uncomfortable before he reached out. His grip was firm but cold, almost clinical. He nodded once. "Yeah," he said, flat and monotone. "Kevin, so where are you from?" I asked, trying to keep it light. "Little town, couple hours north," he replied. "You a freshman too?" "No, sophomore." Cool, I said, hoping he might return a question, maybe start a normal conversation. But he didn't. He turned back to his notebook like the interaction had already ended. I froze for a second, then slumped onto my bed and pretended to scroll through my phone, feeling the awkward silence press against me. That was my first impression of Kevin, and honestly, it didn't change much over the next few weeks. I tried to strike up conversation a few times. I wasn't expecting us to become best friends, just some basic roommate chatter would have been nice. Each time, Kevin offered one-word answers. Sometimes he didn't even look up when I spoke. Finally, one evening, I asked casually if he had eaten yet. "Don't talk to me," he snapped, his voice low, sharp, and final. I blinked, taken aback. Okay man, chill, I was just asking." "I don't want to talk." "Don't talk to me." "Got it." There was something in the way he said it, a cold, absolute command rather than a mere request. A chill ran through me that I couldn't shake. After that, I stopped trying. Still, it wasn't unbearable. Kevin was hardly ever around. Most days he simply disappeared. Gone by the time I woke up, gone when I returned late at night. Sometimes he didn't come back for nearly a week. And then, without warning, I'd walk into the room and there he'd be, sitting at his desk like nothing had happened. The silence and unpredictability began to settle over me, a quiet, creeping unease that I couldn't explain. I never asked where Kevin went. Honestly, I didn't care to know. But after a while, other people started to notice things too. It was around 11 one night. I was lying in bed, the glow of my phone lighting up the dark room, when I heard raised voices echoing from the hallway. At first I figured it was just a couple of drunk freshmen yelling on their way back from some party. But then I recognized one of the voices, Kevin's, sharp, clipped, irritated. "Don't talk to me," he barked. Another voice shot back, confused and pissed. "Dude, I literally just said hi." There was a tense pause, footsteps, then the sound of our door slamming so hard the walls rattled. Kevin stormed in, jaw tight, fist clenched. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. He just sat at his desk, shoulders heaving like he was trying to keep himself from exploding. The silence after was so heavy I didn't even dare breathe too loud. The next day, Mark, the guy who lived a few doors down, caught me in the hallway. "Yo, man," he said, lowering his voice. "Your roommate's a freak." I frowned. "What happened?" "I was just walking past him last night. Said, 'Hey, what's up?' And he lost his shit, dude. Told me to never talk to him again." "Who does that? Seriously, there's something wrong with that guy." I didn't argue. Mark wasn't wrong. Kevin's behavior was getting more unsettling by the day. Still, I kept telling myself to just make it through the semester. I could request a different roommate for spring. For now, I'd keep my head down and avoid him. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday. My schedule was packed, back-to-back classes from morning until early afternoon. When I left that morning, Kevin was gone as usual. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when I came back around 3, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. Everything on my side of the room was gone. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process it. I just stood there staring at the empty space where my bed used to be. The mattress was bare, no sheets, no blanket, no pillow. My desk was cleared. My clothes, my books, my snacks, even my phone charger, gone. The only things left were the cold, ugly pieces of dorm-issued furniture. Kevin's side, though, looked exactly the same. Perfectly neat, perfectly untouched. And of course, he wasn't there. Panic started crawling up my chest. I tore around the room, checking under his bed, in his drawers, his closet, nothing. It was like my entire existence had been erased from the space. Heart pounding, I bolted down the hall and hammered on the RA's door. "Dude," I gasped when he opened it. "All my stuff's gone." Chris, the RA, blinked at me. "What do you mean, gone?" "Gone, like my roommate took it or something." "It's not in the room." We searched the dorm together top to bottom but found nothing. Then campus security got involved. But Maple Hall was old. No cameras, no keycard logs, no real way to trace anything. And Kevin? Nowhere to be found. That night I crashed in my friend Jonah's room. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that half-empty, stripped-down shell of a dorm. Every creak and gust of air made me think he might come back. 2 days later, campus police finally found my stuff. It had been dumped in the woods just off campus, maybe a quarter mile in. Clothes, books, blankets, all of it scattered like garbage. Some of it was soaked and ruined from the rain. My laptop was smashed beyond repair. Kevin never came back. Not that week. Not the next. Not for the rest of the semester. His bed stayed made, his desk untouched, everything perfectly still, like a stage set left behind after the actor vanished. Eventually, the school reassigned me to a single dorm. They gave me a small gift card as compensation for what I'd lost. But no one, me, Mark the RA, ever saw Kevin Larson again. It was like he had never existed at all. And to this day, I still wonder what the hell his deal was, and if he ever really left. I never really thought about how important roommates were until I got one who scared me half to death. Back when I first started college, I was just a regular kid desperate to escape my small town and finally live on my own. My parents were proud but also anxious in that overprotective way only parents can be. They gave me the standard list of warnings before I left. Watch your drink at parties. Don't walk alone at night. Keep your dorm locked. I remember nodding, half listening, thinking they were being dramatic. College was supposed to be like in the movies, right? Loud hallways, open doors, music everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on desks, laughter spilling down the corridor at 2 a.m. And sure, there was some of that, but there was also the weird, awkward part, sharing a shoebox-sized space with a stranger you'd never met. When I got my housing email, I remember staring at the name. Your assigned roommate, Tyler Jensen. Never heard of him. Fine by me. I figured as long as he wasn't a slob or the kind of guy who blasted heavy metal at 3 in the morning, we'd get along just fine. Move-in day was chaos, parents juggling boxes, students dragging futons up narrow staircases, Rays trying to organize the mayhem with forced cheerfulness. Dawson Hall was one of the older dorms, the kind with floors that creaked under your feet and that faint smell of disinfectant mixed with burnt popcorn. My room was on the 3rd floor. When I opened the door, half the room was already claimed. Posters of punk bands I didn't recognize were taped to the wall. A stack of sketchbooks sat neatly by the desk, and the bed on the left was made with gray sheets. Neat, plain, precise. A moment later, the door swung open and this tall, skinny guy stepped in. Messy blonde hair, pale skin, and these sharp blue eyes that seemed to size you up before you even said a word. "You must be Chris," he said flatly. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a grin. "And you're Tyler?" He gave a small nod. No handshake, no smile. Just dropped his backpack on the floor and started unpacking like I wasn't even there. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Not everyone's social on day 1, but as the weeks went on, it became obvious. Tyler wasn't just quiet. He was different. Classes had started and the floor had this easy, chaotic energy. Doors stayed open. Someone was always playing music. People drifted in and out of each other's rooms, laughing, sharing food. But Tyler never joined. He stayed in our room most of the time. Blinds half drawn, laptop open, headphones in. Sometimes I'd walk in and he'd be sitting perfectly still on his bed, eyes locked on his screen, typing with this eerie focus. He'd barely acknowledge me. But then other nights he'd start talking out of nowhere, and it was always strange. One night, I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when he suddenly said, "Hey, do you ever think about how easy it is to sneak around here?" I looked up. "What?" "I mean, nobody locks their doors," he continued, staring straight ahead. "You could just walk into someone's room, take whatever you wanted, and they wouldn't even know until later." I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess. But you'd get caught, man." He didn't laugh. Didn't even smile. Just gave this small shrug and turned back to his laptop. The silence after that felt heavy, like the air itself had changed. That was the first time I felt uneasy around him. By the 3rd week, rumors started spreading. Someone had been creeping around at night. Some guy in all black with a ski mask, running down hallways, slamming doors, chasing students across the quad before disappearing. He'd knock over trash cans, smear weird stuff on bathroom mirrors, even steal random things, chargers, headphones, textbooks. People called him the Phantom of Dawson Hall. In the dining hall, it was all anyone talked about. "Yo, I saw him last night," one guy bragged. "He sprinted down my hall and scared the crap out of my roommate." "Nah, man," another said. "He was near the library. I swear I saw him dart into the trees." Everyone laughed, but I couldn't shake the chill it gave me. Stuff like that didn't happen back home. And for some reason, every time someone mentioned the Phantom, I found myself thinking about Tyler. His stillness, his odd questions, those cold blue eyes that never quite blinked enough. Then one afternoon, a guy from down the hall, Kenny, burst into the lounge, face flushed, breathing hard. "Somebody trashed my room," he shouted. Like seriously tore it apart. Clothes everywhere, desk flipped, and my laptop's gone. Everyone turned to stare. A few gasped, others muttered, "No way," or "Dude, that's crazy." And all I could think was how easy it was to sneak around here. The RAs called campus security, but nobody saw who did it. The obvious theory, the masked guy. That night, Dawson Hall buzzed like a kicked beehive. For the first time, doors stayed locked. The Phantom wasn't funny anymore. And me? I kept sneaking glances at Tyler. He didn't say a word about it, just sat at his desk pretending to work, the soft tapping of his keyboard the only sound between us. But every now and then, when he thought I wasn't looking, I caught it, a tiny, satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. A week later, something happened that I'll never forget. One of my classes ended early, so I headed back to the dorm around 11. The building was practically silent at that hour. Most people were still in lectures. When I pushed open the door to our room, it was empty. I tossed my bag onto the bed, grabbed a bag of chips, and sat down, the quiet almost comforting. 5 minutes later, I heard the lock click. The door swung open fast, too fast, and there he was. The masked guy, dressed head to toe in black, ski mask pulled tight over his face. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. I just froze, the air catching in my throat, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I was staring straight at the phantom of Dawson Hall. Then he yanked the mask off. It was Tyler. Jesus Christ, I gasped, stumbling to my feet. It's you. His eyes widened. Why aren't you in class? His voice was sharp, panicked. What the hell, man? You're the guy everyone's talking about. He shut the door fast, locking it. You don't say a word about this, he hissed. Not to anyone. You get that? I backed up toward my bed, my hands trembling. You trashed Kenny's room. You stole his laptop. Shut up, he snapped, eyes narrowing. If you tell anyone, you'll regret it. My throat went dry. Just give it back, okay? You don't need to do this. Just stop. For a long, heavy moment, he stared at me, breathing hard through his nose. Then he muttered, Fine, I'll handle it. But you keep quiet. I nodded quickly, desperate for the moment to end. That night, I barely slept. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the shift of his mattress, made me jolt awake. The air in that room felt toxic, like something invisible pressing on my chest. The next morning, I went straight to housing and requested a new room. Thankfully, they had a space open in another building. When I told Tyler I was moving out, he just stood there, his face hard. You don't need to do that, he said flatly. I just think it'll be better, I replied carefully. We're not really clicking, you know? His jaw tightened. He leaned in a little, his voice low. Don't think moving out changes anything. If you tell, I'll make you regret it. I didn't answer. I just kept packing, pretending not to hear the threat echoing in my head. For a few days, things were quiet. I didn't see him around campus. I started to hope maybe he'd stopped. But then I ran into Kenny in the lounge. Hey, I asked, did you ever get your laptop back? He shook his head, looking frustrated. Nope, security's got no leads. I'm screwed. That was it. I couldn't let Tyler keep getting away with it. I went back to housing and told them everything, the mask, the threats, the stolen stuff. The woman behind the desk blinked at me, wide-eyed. We'll handle it, she said finally. That night, for the first time in weeks, I felt relief. Until midnight. I was lying in my new bed when I heard someone jiggling the door handle. Soft at first, then harder. My blood turned cold. The knob twisted violently. Then came the pounding. I jumped up, heart slamming against my ribs, and peered through the peephole. It was Tyler. His face was twisted with rage, veins standing out in his neck as he slammed his fists against the door. Open up, Chris, he shouted. You think you can rat me out? He kicked the door so hard it rattled in the frame. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, my desk lamp, and held it like a weapon. Go away, I yelled. I called security. That wasn't true, but it made him pause. Then came the voice that saved me. What the hell's going on here? It was the RA. Tyler froze, turned, and bolted down the hall. The RA chased after him, but he was gone before anyone else even opened their doors. The next morning, word spread fast. Tyler had been expelled. Campus security found Kenny's laptop in his room. I should have felt relieved, and part of me did, but mostly I was shaken. For weeks afterward, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those cold blue eyes watching me from the crowd. He never came back. Still, sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows start to move just a little, I think about that moment when he pulled off the mask. The way his eyes looked, human, but wrong somehow. That was when I realized the monster everyone feared wasn't some faceless stranger lurking in the dark. It was the person I'd been living with,